Why China attacked Vietnam. In 1979, China pulled out all the stops and launched a surprise invasion of Vietnam, igniting the infamous Sino-Vietnamese War. This epic clash of nations raged on for just over a month, culminating in a hard-won victory for China. But don't let that fool you, my friends, because this brutal military campaign was anything but a walk in the park. It was a costly and controversial conflict that left both countries reeling, and its impact was felt for years to come. Let's hop into the time machine and take a trip back to the ancient Chinese Empire, where the seeds of the Sino-Vietnamese War were first sown. China and Vietnam had a storied history of rivalry, folks, with deep historical and ideological roots that ran wild like kudzu. Vietnam had managed to break free from the imperial yoke and forge its own unique identity over the centuries, while China clung tight to its own brand of communist ideology. To make matters even more interesting, Vietnam had a bit of a crush on the Soviet Union, while China played it cool and went its own way. It's like a classic love triangle, but with way more tanks and artillery. Now, things started heating up in the 70s when Vietnam started throwing its weight around in making some big claims on the world stage. But it wasn't until 1978 that things really got spicy, folks. Vietnam up and invaded Cambodia, which just so happened to be ruled by a Chinese-backed government. That's like going after your ex's new lover, am I right? China took one look at this brazen move and decided enough was enough. They saw this as a direct threat to their security and regional influence and knew it was time to bust out the big guns, literally. On February 17, 1979, China kicked off the mother of all invasions. They sent hundreds of thousands of troops across the border in multiple locations, and boy, were they fired up. At first, things were looking pretty good for the Chinese army, with significant gains made and key cities captured left, right, and center. But the Vietnamese army wasn't about to just roll over and take it, no sir. They rallied together like a pack of angry badgers and launched a fierce counteroffensive, using their knowledge of the terrain and some seriously sneaky guerrilla tactics to give the Chinese a run for their money. It was like watching a high-stakes game of chess, but with tanks and grenades instead of pawns and bishops. Guys, it was like watching two prize fighters in the ring throwing punches left and right but unable to knock each other out. The Sino-Vietnamese War quickly became a quagmire for both sides, with neither able to gain the upper hand. The fighting dragged on for over a month, with intense battles breaking out in the mountainous border regions. It was like a scene out of an action movie, but with real bullets and bombs flying all over the place. To make matters even more interesting, both sides also got up to some sneaky business outside of the military realm, engaging in all sorts of propaganda and sabotage operations against each other. It was like a spy movie coming to life, and nobody knew who to trust. Finally, on the first week of March, both sides decided it was time to call it quits and agreed to a ceasefire. China was quick to claim victory, but let's be real folks, they failed to achieve their strategic objectives. The Sino-Vietnamese War had been a costly and controversial campaign for both sides, with estimates of up to a staggering 50,000 casualties on both sides. That's like a whole stadium full of people. It's safe to say that the war was not worth it for either side. To make matters even worse, relations between China and Vietnam were strained for decades to come, with both countries pointing fingers at each other and accusing one another of aggression and betrayal. It was like a bad breakup that neither party could move on from. The Sino-Vietnamese War wasn't just a fight between two countries, folks. It had significant implications for the entire region. China, who had previously been seen as a regional powerhouse, lost some serious street cred after the war, while Vietnam was like, I'll take that, thank you very much, and strengthened its ties with the Soviet Union. It was like a game of musical chairs, but with countries jockeying for power instead of people scrambling for seats. The war also led to a broader shift in China's foreign policy, with the country adopting a more cautious and pragmatic approach to regional security. It was like they learned their lesson the hard way, guys. And that, my friends, is the story of the Sino-Vietnamese War, a complex and multifaceted conflict that left both China and Vietnam nursing their wounds. It was a battle that was driven by deep historical and ideological tensions, with each side seeing themselves as the righteous defender of their respective nations. But at the end of the day, it proved to be a costly and controversial campaign that left a lasting impact on both countries and the broader region. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think was the most significant consequence of the Sino-Vietnamese War? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video for more fascinating stories like this one.